Today we will study Part 2 of Unit 3 of Public Administration in India, which is named B. Budget Types, Line Budgeting, Performance Planning Budgeting, Zero-Based Budgeting, C. Budget, Role of Finance Ministry. So let's start our chapter. Firstly, we will talk about what is budget? As we are a social person and try to live a stable life, budget or budgeting can be understood as an inseparable part of our life. Budgeting is a common activity. In some extent, everyone use it. So as a common phenomena, budget is a quantitative numerical plan to achieve required goals. Budgeting is an important activity for planned economy. There are three aspects of budget: accountability, management, and economic determination. In the aspect of accountability and economic determination, it gives the direction of economy and expenses as it leads the users of resources in more beneficial way. And the same way as an economic determinant, it promotes the economic balance between taxes and expenses. It can be seen as a tool of management for economic planning and programming. When we see it in the scope of governmental budget, it is a part of economic planning in the form of statement. This statement contains a forecast of revenues and expenditures for a period of time. So, in this sense, we can see that budget has some important components and features like its quantitative nature, economic plan for future expenditure, and its time components. That means it is made for a fixed time period. In the context of governmental budget, budget can be seen as a medium for achieving the policy objectives, schemes, welfare programs, projects, etc. set by a government. In the one hand, budget is a reflection of future goals, expenditure, and on the other hand, it is detailed allocation of proposed taxation and resources. We can say that budget is the accountability of government to their citizens, and as well as it is the future financial allocation of resources. Now we understand about what is budgeting. It is the instrument of economic management. It is a type of financial policy of respective organization. It can also understand as a tool of political management as it works for operational documentation of expense, time, and dimensions and aspects of expected results. In the sense of common phenomena, budgeting is the process or act of preparing a budget. It is a process of selection of medium and ends. In one part, it is an informative documentation for resource allocation, and in the second part, it is a process of gathering right and relevant information. This is the informative documentation, as it gives the information for consumption, investment, and transfer with the identification of sectors. This information helps to allocate the resources. On the other side, it gathered the data for the SAM. In the context of public governmental budgeting involves in political exercise as it analyzes the government expenses, the distribution of financial or economic resources between private and public sectors. Budgeting examines how the organization's resources have been used in the past, analyzing what has been used in the past, analyzing what has been accomplished and at what cost, and charting a course for the future by allocating resources for the coming budget period, assigning responsibility to units for achieving the determined results. Let's talk about what are the various approaches of budgeting. Leading the balance between income and expenses are difficult task, and if it is about the all three aspects, accountability, management, and economic determination, the level of responsibility towards the right decision makes it think and employed work. On the other hand, to the achievement of final goal, a big goal takes time. Reaching to the final goal regularity is prerequisite. This difficult task has get importance to analyze as it identified the central point of development goal. But the early writing and scholarly analysis was not operational or empirical. It was based on the normative study. Those studies were about the assumptions of income and its distribution towards the expenditure. Early time, the dominant trend in the context of budget studies or financial expenditures was influences by the day-to-day study of budgeting administration. It was useful to understand the art of budgeting. In the 18th century, budget got separate attention as a fiscal department from the just administrative work. By this process, gradually, pattern of analysis and the study of budget also had changed. In the 19th century, James Mill and J.S. Mill had introduced fiscal matters as a central force of administrative and political activities. Gradually, study of budget got empirical form, as it focuses on the study of not only the expenses but the relationship of these expenses with demands. New aspect of these study represent the approaches where the demand of services, expenditure of finance and allocation of resources are interlinked. Marginal utility approach. Marginal utility is a part of economic aspect of budgeting. It is a school of thought that focuses on the rational or normative aspects of budget. It determines the formation of organizational expenditure and budgeting. This school of thought was developed in 1920s for fiscal control. Public goods approach. Public goods approach is related to neoclassical fiscal theory in 1950s. It is all about the public goods and process of their selection in budget. Selection and needs of public goods directs the budget expenditure. Objective of this approach are to determine the expenditure and implement the objectives of policies. Within it, planners set preferences for private and public goods to maximize the utility of resources. Public choice approach. Public choice approach focuses on the importance of public preferences in the context of political process. It emphasizes on the political process which involves in identifying the public choices and non-market issues in democratic society. According to Anthony Downs, government plans expenditure and revenues to maximizes their own chances of winning. According to this approach, allocation of funds and resources are a political process. Positive approach. Positive approach deals with empirical aspect of expenditures. It is also about the formulation of policies and verification of its objectives. This approach developed in 1960s. It works for the financial hypothesis where it tests the growth of public expenditures. It depends on the empirical laws as it does the empirical study of formulated programs and finds the reasons behind the difficulties. Now we understand about what are the types of budget? As we know that budget is the part of government's administrative process, it is made for the better and efficient use of resources. So according to administrative features and preferences, we can see there are different kinds of budgeting. In these, difference can be seen about the structural aspects, preferential factors and manner of implementation. Performance budgeting. It is the traditional budget system. It is about activities, functions and programs and projects of government. Basically, it is outcome-oriented. It focuses on the outcome of services and specific use of resources under the fixed time period. But it is also about the allocation as it has some features of program budgeting. So it is about evaluation and allocation of the resources and services. Program budgeting. Program budget is the desirable form of structured performance budgeting. It has all the features of performance budgeting, but in the feasible manner. It was introduced by the SAM Committee, Hoover Commission, in 1955. Budget focuses on the classification of expenditure, government's work and analysis of costs. Basically, this budget can be considered as a primary and essential step of performance budgeting. There are basically two differences can be found between performance and program budgeting. First, performance budgeting is about management and controlling, as it focuses on the analysis of the previous services and allocation. On the other hand, program budgeting focuses on the planning, and its analysis is about the forward-oriented. Planning Programming Budget (PPB). Planning Programming Budget 1965 has introduced with this claim that it is able to do programming for better life at lowest cost. It involves in specification of goals, plans and their formulation. It was similar with the old system in some extent, as it also focuses on the analysis of past plans. But it was different in the context of approach. That is the pragmatic approach, which was the base of this system. By this approach, finding of alternatives according to specific works was the center point of analysis. Within this, American government has introduced 3 levels. Policy management. It was about the identification of requirements, alternatives of programs and the allocation of present resources and services. Resource management. On this level, management of resources with the reference of old budget system is used. It establishes the strong structure for the budget and allocates the financial management. Program management. On this level, analysis, reporting and evaluation of plan are the main concern. Line item budgeting. Line item budget is the simplest kind of budget. It is used for the small and short-term budget. It advocates that there are different kind of income sources and different type of expenses. Basically, it allocates the cost. It focuses on the reduction of cost to make planning more practical. With the reduction of cost, it works to control the expenditure on the one item to save the budget for other necessary items. In this budget system, top authority has responsibility to control the all expenditures. Zero-based budgeting. Zero-based budgeting is useful for the agriculture budgeting and was, first, introduced in the context of agriculture itself. Continuation of programs and plans are not allowed in this budget system as it focuses on the start with ground-up programming. It finds the new satisfactory plans for contemporary and new issues as it never prefers to make changes or search alternates of existing plans. It focuses on the base of formulation plans. Base is equally important for this budget system, and by this increment of the base become possible as it is difficult to the other budget systems. Budget cycle. To provide timeliness to executive and legislative processes, the budgeting process is made in a circular manner. In a responsible government, the process of approval or acceptance is very important. There are 4 following stages in this cycle. 1. Preparation of income expenditure estimates for the coming financial year. 2. Receipt by Parliament in the form of Revenue Acts and Appropriation Acts. 3. Implementation of Revenue Acts and Appropriation Acts. And 4. Review and control of financial activities by audit on behalf of the Parliament. Budget preparation. The budget formulation process in India begins formally during September-October, 6 months before the presentation of the budget, on the receipt of a circular from the Ministry of Finance. In the different circulars of the plan and non-plan miscellaneous items, the list of the time of sending final estimates and the guidelines for testing the budget estimates made by the concerned department are also given. According to the budget and accounting classification, the budget estimates prepared by the ministries and departments are analyzed by the financial advisors concerned. Enactment of the budget. The budget in Parliament passes through following 5 stages. 1. Presentation of budget. 2. General discussion. 3. Voting on demands for grants. 4. Passing of appropriation bill. 5. Passing of finance bill. 1. Presentation of Budget. The budget session of the Indian Parliament starts in the mid-February. The budget is presented in Parliament into two parts, the Railway Budget and the General Budget. The Railway Budget contains the details of railways' income and their expenditure and is presented by the Railway Minister. The General Budget is related to the demands of all other departments except the railways. It is presented by the Finance Minister in the Parliament. General Discussion. General discussion on the budget starts a few days after its presentation. Normally, this discussion of 3 to 4 days goes on in both the Houses of Parliament. It is a British tradition and heritage. At this stage, the Lok Sabha can discuss the entire budget or any theoretical aspect of it. But during this time neither a motion can be introduced nor the budget can be put up for voting in the House. Voting on demands for grants. At the end of the general discussion, the Lok Sabha begins the process of voting on the demands for grants, which is not a weighted expenditure on the Consolidated Fund of India. Separate voting can take place for every demand. At this stage, the MPs can discuss the details of the budget. They can also propose to reduce or decrease the demand for a particular grant. These proposals are also called cut motions. These are of three types. Policy cut motion. It refers to the rejection of the policy on demand. Accordingly, the amount of demand can be reduced to a certain amount, which may be a one-time reduction in demand or non-inclusion or reduction of any one item in the demand. Economic cut motion. This proposal is introduced to reduce the amount of money in a fixed budget from the point of view of economy due to out of demand. If an MP feels that unnecessary expenditure is being incurred in a demand, then he can present it. Token cut motion. It brings forth the complaint problem which is under the jurisdiction of the Government of India. Under this, 100 rupees can be deducted from the total amount of demand. 4. Passage of Appropriation Bill. The next step is to pass the Annual Appropriation Bill. According to Article 114 of the Constitution, no money shall be withdrawn from the Consolidated Fund of India without appropriation by the law. In other words, all the expenses and investments made in the context of public welfare of the Government of India are mentioned in the Appropriation Bill. 5. Passing of Finance Bill. The Appropriation Act empowers the government to withdraw funds from the Consolidated Fund, but it has not yet been arranged where the money will come from. Hence, there is a system of collecting money by taxation. A finance bill is introduced in the House for this purpose. The bill contains financial proposals of the government for the next year. The details of various taxes, fees, etc. levied by the Government of India are given in the Finance Bill. Execution of the budget. Implementation of the budget is the responsibility of the executive government. The process of implementation of the budget depends on the distribution and delegation of powers at various operating levels. As soon as the Appropriation Act is passed, the Ministry of Finance advises the spending ministries and departments about their allocated funds. Then the controlling officers of each ministry and department provide allocation and advice to different disbursing officers. The expenditure is organized in such a way that the amount given in the hands of the spending authority is not spent before the additional amount is received. Audit. The executive spends public funds which are authorized by the legislature. The government conducts an audit of public expenditure by an independent agency to determine its liability to the Parliament. For this work, the Constitution provides the post of Controller and Auditor General of India. It is his duty to ensure that the allocation of funds to various agencies of the government is done by the law. The rules, orders and procedures to governing such expenditure have been followed. the value of the money spent has been received. The documents of the loan have been kept compiled and submitted to the competent authority. This is the last phase of the budget cycle. Now let's complete this chapter with this. Conclusion. According to the above explanation, budget can be understood as a future stability and growth plan, as at starting it reflected the accountability of legislature towards the people. After the development of understanding the concept, now it must be understood by the broader manner, as now it reflects the future growth possibility and limitations or management of expenses for that growth. Every nation has its own pattern of budget implementation. Actually, the features and structure of budget depends on the nation's financial status, as developing countries have their own list of expenditure and different goal from the developed countries. On the other hand, developed countries' expenditures can be traced by their next achievement goals. Various parts of budget are also can be seen, as there are gender budgeting, environment, rail etc. budget pattern are in trend, which are only the part of main budget. Just because of the extension of budget process it got separated to the main budget. But they all are made by the pursuance of the main budget. Thus, we can say that there is a long procedure of budget formulation and enactment in India. Many reforms were brought by the colonial rule, especially in 1919 and thereafter in 1935. The system of finance inherited by India in 1947 was highly rigid, rule-oriented and complex. Essentially, it was for the achievement of fundamental colonial objectives and not for the solution of national problems. Undoubtedly, public welfare is the main objective of the budget. Therefore, according to their expectations and requirements for the development of Indian people, the budget is presented every year by the government. Thank you.